Hey, welcome to the Bag Chatter Podcast. I am your host, Bryan, joined as always by my co-host, a man who is ready to not give any putts outside of 2 feet this weekend. Adam, how you doing today?
I'm well. I haven't even thought about that. Are there concessions in gap matches?
That is literally the only thing I think about leading up to gap matches is like the whole giving putts to your opponent thing. It can be stressful if you overthink it, so I'm trying not to overthink it.
I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to barely give anybody anything. How about that?
I love that. Now, there is also, in these gap matches, there's a team game going at the same time, you and your partner against him and his partner. So a lot of times you're conferring on whether or not to give a putt. You're not kind of on an island there. Yeah. So
in JK, we'll have to go over that. We are a team this weekend, but I'm always team. Hey, putt 2.5 footers.
Yeah, I agree. And it never hurts to just say, why don't you put a coin on that? And then you can always give it to them a couple minutes later, depending on how things play out.
Or not. Just make them putt. Or just make them putt it.
Or just make them putt it. Yeah. And I always assume that they're just going to make me putt it too. So, yeah. This season is all about competition. Welcome to anybody who is new to the show for this episode. This is our second season of Bag Chatter. Adam and I are focusing on competitions this year, team competitions, and individual competitions. We've got a couple episodes under our belt already talking about some of that stuff. And this weekend marks the first of 3 weekends in a row where we represent our club, Honeybrook Golf Club, in the GAP team matches. That's the Golf Association of Philadelphia. It's one of the oldest kind of ongoing competitions in the country. It's pretty cool. It's a non-handicapped event. So you might draw somebody who's a few strokes better or worse than you. I've played in it the last few years and with varying results. Adam, I don't think you've ever played in gap team matches, so I'm excited for that.
Not once. I can't wait. You know, it's something where it's cool to play for your club. It's cool. I'm trying to play as few handicapped events as possible this year. So playing straight up, that's how I like to play. Yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Before we get to that, and we'll talk about probably those gap team matches maybe later next month, how those go. This episode, I'm pretty excited for. This is a conversation that we had a few days ago with Jon Sherman from Practical Golf. Jon just wrote a book called The Foundations of Winning Golf, and we had him on to sort of play a tongue-in-cheek mediator for us as we talked about our different approaches to competition. And I thought the conversation went pretty well. I thought I came out looking better than anyone in it. I don't know how you felt.
You were a real stick in the mud. That's funny that you say that. I was going to point out that Jon and I had a real rapport, I thought. And we just kind of, you were third wheeling Jon's in my conversation.
You and Jon were DMing each other like, how can we get rid of Bryan so we can actually talk golf here?
Absolutely. Just run. We just run. Will he try to follow?
Well, I'll let y'all, the listeners, be the judge. Now, there were no losers in this conversation, only winners.
Except you. Sorry. I don't know. It's like you weren't listening to the first part. All
right. I'm gonna cut Adam's mic, and here's that conversation. All right. Well, we are thrilled to be joined today by none other than Jon Sherman from Practical Golf, fighting the war against double bogeys, and now helping us to fight the competitive war as well. Jon, thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. You are in for a treat today because you are you are going to be mediating a long-standing feud between two friends who look at competitive golf in a different way. Before we get into that, we're going to open it up so that you can brag about yourself a little bit. Tell us about some of your accolades, some of the things that you've done in competitive golf. You can go as far back as you want.
I mean, it started off pretty mediocre. I mean, as a junior golfer, I was nothing special. I was a captain of a pretty poor high school team. I walked onto a Division III golf team and quit after one semester. My coach was forced to play me. I remember one match and I shot like a 52 on 9 holes the day before. And he's like, I remember it very specifically. He's like, can you do this? Like, meaning like, can you not embarrass us? And somehow I shot like I think it was a 74 or 75 and finished second, and then just like dropped the mic and quit the team and had the lowest scoring average. So that was my college career. And then, yeah, I lived in New York City for a really long time and didn't get to play much golf, definitely not competitively. And when I kind of got more serious about golf again and started my website, and this was about 10 years ago, I started to compete again. And, long story short, I've competed in, we're lucky I live in the New York metro area. We have the MGA, the Long Island Golf Association, the New York State Golf Association. Like I'll brag about us. We're very spoiled around here. I think we have some of the best amateur circuits. So for the last 10 years, I've competing on that circuit and trying to get into national tournaments, and I've played in some other events, and it's been a crazy ride. And I tried to talk about that in my new book. And, it's culminated in, I've placed very well in some competitions that I had no business in being in. And I've won a couple of club championships. And last year, I guess the culminating moment was winning a USGA medal. I was fortunate enough to win the qualifier for the US Mid-Am. So I got a USGA medal, which is, I told my son, he doesn't play golf, but I'm like, whenever I go, you can have this thing. This is my thing. I don't know if I'll have any more of them, but I guess that was kind of one of the culmination moments. And the last almost year, I've been coaching a player on the PGA Tour, so I've gotten a really good look at the highest levels of competition. So yeah, I just find competing, the stuff that goes on in our heads, the expectations, all that stuff, it's like the ultimate test, and I find it fascinating. And I'm kind of a guinea pig myself. So I'm nothing special. I never had any special talent. And I've gotten to a place where I think I've outperformed my expectations, and I'm very happy with that. But, I know you two guys are at odds with what you want out of competition. And I listened into some of your episode, and Bryan had sent me an email. So I think I know what I'm getting into, and hopefully I can mediate appropriately.
See, the problem here is that you listed a wonderful little golf resume is what you had there. You mentioned, your local circuit. We've got very similar golf circuits here in Philadelphia. You won a USGA medal, which has sort of been like, I've always considered that like a peak of an aspirational goal for me to someday, even if it's not a medalist, just get through a USGA qualifier in some form. And what Bryan would say to my goals and to your resume is, I don't care. That's what he would say. That's what he would say. He won't say it to you, but privately, he has no such goals whatsoever. And I think therein lies the tumult that we have to hear.
So I've got a nihilist and someone who's like shooting for the stars.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. See, Adam, your sentence had something true and something not true in it. I do very much care for Jon that he was able to achieve those things, because clearly it's a goal of his. So I do care about that, but it is not something that I've ever necessarily wanted for myself. Now, maybe you, Adam, would say that I'm sort of lying to myself about what I want in life, and that might be a whole nother way this conversation could go. But Adam, 30 seconds for any new listeners. Tell them like how you feel about competition and what that's meant to you through your golfing life.
Well, it's not that my competitive golf career is something, certainly nothing to write home about. It's like I also played on very mediocre high school teams, was a good player on those teams, ish. But I care about competition in general. I'm a competitive person, and I feel that the best way to test your game is to put it into competition. I think that someone who is playing, who can shoot even par, who can shoot under par with their friends on a Tuesday at their home course, I think that speaks less to the quality of your golf game than being able to do that in a competition when it matters, when there's something on the line. So for me, a huge goal of my life is to become a better competitive golfer, and to put my game to the test at the highest level that I am able to put it to the test.
Jon, I'm going to give you full carte blanche here. Anytime Adam says something that you disagree with or you don't like, please just chime in at any point. I'm curious, Jon, if somebody said to you, I'm a one handicap, and then would you follow up with, oh, what competitions do you play? Or if they told you they weren't really into competitive golf, how would you feel about that?
To be honest, I probably wouldn't think about it. They are two different versions of golf. And I don't think a lot of golfers should pursue like a hardcore amateur career because it might not be enjoyable for them, the stuff they go through. Like I've got tournaments coming up in May, and yeah, I look forward to them. But at the same time, like you still somewhat stare into the abyss a bit and you're like, how bad can this get? Like I haven't been able to play much. I've been injured a bit. So I'm like, I don't know what kind of game I'm going to show up with. I just wrote a book about competition. What if I blow up? And everyone's like, oh, this guy's a farce. So yeah, I mean, it does things to you that are uncomfortable, no matter how good you get. And this goes for the guys on the tour and the girls on the tour. Like, I don't care how good you get. You are staring at that abyss in one shape or form. And you have to embrace that in some way. And if you don't want to, like, that's totally cool. So if someone came to me and said they're a one handicap, play at their home course mostly and maybe play a few other courses, I'm like, wow, that's a really good golfer. If they said I'm a one handicap and I play, 10, 15 events a year, I'm like, yeah, okay. So then you're putting your game to a test at another level. Like, okay, that's cool too. So I'm a big believer that two things can be true at the same time. And I think between the two of you, I think both of your perspectives can be true at the same time for each of you. I don't think one is necessarily right. I'm always about managing expectations. And if we can all come to terms with what we want out of it and they are like healthy goals, awesome. There's always a balance between like the not caring at all and then caring way too much. Like that is the challenge of golf, whether you compete or not. So yeah, I think there is room for it all, but they are different pursuits, I think.
Adam, we talked about this a little bit in the first episode about you really tie your identity to the fact that you are a golfer and a very good golfer. And you feel like you really want to achieve something grand in the game of golf. And saying that, knowing, as we talked about in the episode, I know I'm not going to make the tour. I know I'm not going to be making a run at the senior tour. But I still want to do something in golf that I am very proud of. Is that the main reason why you compete? And how else would you define sort of why you compete in golf?
Obviously, the reason you golf is because you love golf. I think that, I hope that's true for everyone. So that's true for me. But I do think there's a thing for me, and I'm speaking completely personally here, that I've golfed since I was 9 years old. I started the week of the 97 Masters. Saturday of the 97 Masters, I dug my dad's old clubs out of the garage and started playing golf. And it's been the most constant thing in my life for the last, 25, 27 years or whatever it's been. And it's something where I have invested time and energy into golf to a degree that has confused family members at times. They've been like, why did Adam love it? And so there is a degree of wanting to say, hey, this was worth it. And now nobody in my family is pressing me for this. Everyone understands that if I don't accomplish anything in amateur golf, because in one sense, who cares, but and that I love golf and I will do it till I die, no matter what. And I enjoy being out on the course. I enjoy being with friends, but there is something about it that makes me want to say I have put more time and energy into this than almost anything else. And there is a degree to which I'm like, yeah, I want something to show for that. Is that an unhealthy way to look at the last, 25 plus years of my life golfing?
Not entirely. Like I'm similar to you. Like I took up the game 25, 30 years ago. Like golf is part of my identity. I think I went way too overboard on like scoring expectations, and then it really wrecked my enjoyment of the game. I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth. Like I'm super proud to have my USGA medal over there and trophies. I never thought I would have them. But at the same time, I've gotten respect of other golfers and all that stuff. But I've also realized like that stuff comes and goes. Mm-hmm. It's nice. Like I don't think about it all the time. I have a koozie that I drink some beer out of from the US Mid-Am, and that reminds me I got into it. Mm-hmm. But it's not like I wake up every morning and I'm like, oh man, I played in the US Mid-Am last year. Look at me. And my kids don't care. They don't really understand golf. So it kind of comes and goes. And I find like I have that satisfaction that I did that, but there has to be something bigger driving me other than just like the external results and what other people would think of me. And I do talk about that a lot in the book in the goal setting section. It depends on the person, but I think mixing or balancing I'm playing for me, I'm trying to strive towards this and work on it. And I get a lot of satisfaction from that with but I want to get here eventually and achieve this. It's hard to do, but I think this is horribly cliched, but if you're looking at that top of the mountain all the time and that's all you're thinking about, it's so hard to get there because like in a tournament situation, like if I'm thinking about making the cut or qualifying or winning all the time, I can't let my body and my mind be in a state that allows me to perform at my best. So I have to put all that away and disassociate from the results as much as possible. And the only way to do that, like when I stepped up to that US Mid-Am qualifier, I was like, I almost didn't play in it, to be honest. Like I wasn't playing particularly well. Like I didn't go in there thinking I was going to shoot at 68 and then beat everybody, but it just kind of happened. And I had the experience to deal with it. I was ready for it. But it wasn't like I teed it up that morning being like, oh my God, you better do this. Like you need to do this. Like that was the last thing on my mind. And I think a lot of golfers are kind of like that. I can't prove it, but I would say most people can't perform their best on the course when they're like trying to be that killer and win. Like I'd say Tiger and a few others might be that person, but for most of us, like I think it just, it pushes us in the opposite direction. So it's super tricky. I don't think I have the right answers, but I think, we all need to like think long and hard about it because I just want to have fun. That's my main goal. Like I want to enjoy it. And the second I stop enjoying it, I will not play in tournaments.
I'm curious, a difference between Bryan and I'm interested how you advise people in this, is that, so you talk about, you didn't have a lot of expectations the day of maybe your greatest accomplishment. And it's like your greatest golf accomplishment, I should say. Are you someone, so do you believe in trying not to keep score? Like, do you know where you're at through a round?
Oh yeah. Like when I recounted that round, like, I mean, I knew I was 5 under par through 10. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, right. What are we doing here? So obviously you're thinking about results,
right?
You can't not. And if you fight against that's ridiculous. I'm trying to say that I tee up with holding myself accountable to certain standards that I think can get me the win or whatever.
Sure.
And that's, I am going to be engaged. I'm going to like not give up, pick good targets, just be in my process all day, try and have a good time, talk with my playing partners. But I teed it up that morning serious about what I was going to do. But I wasn't expecting like, I'm just open to what's going to happen. But once I tee it up, I have the experience where, yeah, I had gotten close a few times and I knew I was good enough to do it. It's just like, will it be today? I don't know. And if it's not, I'll be fine. If it is, that's great too. But, just trying to lock myself in the process of what I hold myself accountable to in every round is more important. And in that day, like, yeah, things worked out in my favor. Like things just went really well. And I was able to kind of deal with all those thoughts in my head of like, oh, don't blow this. And then other thoughts were like, yeah, this is great. Like, keep going, man. Like, don't be scared of this. So yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff that went through my head. I absolutely cared about the result. It's again, that was the balance that seemed to work for me on that day.
All right, Adam, that was a good point scored for you there. It was a little bit ridiculous for me I did try to live in a headspace where I didn't know where I was. And actually it wasn't very difficult for me, which I know always confounded Adam, how we could be 6 holes into a round and I didn't know what my score was.
It's possible for sure. Like I don't think about my score that much all the time, but in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, I'm 2 over or 1 under. Like I try not to think about it, but it's still like bouncing around in there. Right. So it's like, again, it's always, I think the magic thing in golf is like, again, drifting somewhere between like not too engaged or too focused on the score, but then not playing like, I don't give a crap golf either. So everyone's got to find like that level somewhere in between those two.
I think that's a point for you, Bryan, that he didn't label your sociopathy what it is.
I'll take it. Speaking of points for me, can you publicly chastise Adam for before rounds saying things to me like, I'm shooting a 72 today, Bryan. What score are you going to shoot?
Guessing games are fun, guys. Come on.
Golf's an interesting game where like different things can work. And if you feel like talking about scores and pumping yourself up that way is working for you and it's not like placing undue stress on you, awesome. Like, go for it. But if you find that, as you coming down the stretch, you cannot get your mind off of this stuff, then yeah, you're probably overdoing it. That's why, like, I always tell golfers, whether you're competing or not, like, we have to pay attention to what's going on in our rounds and take like notes afterwards. And that's where like the gold is. So if you look back and you're saying, well, that intention is working for me, like, great. I feel like this is helpful. Keep doing it. If you need to go in the opposite direction, being like, I can't think about my score as much, and I'm going to have to figure out a way to redirect my brain in those moments, then yeah, that's going to be helpful too. I don't think everyone's the same, but in my experience, I think most golfers get tied up on the external stuff way too much, because that's what this game makes very easy to do. We get a score on every hole. We get a score for every day. Everyone asks you, well, how'd you play? What'd you shoot? What'd you shoot? What'd you shoot? So we're like conditioned to think about this stuff all the time. And I think like going away from it or finding balance is one of the game's like great challenges. But again, different answers for different golfers probably.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned there was undue stress. And I think that's an interesting phrase. One of the things that came up in the last episode Adam and I did was he was talking about basically like he is constantly looking for ways to add a little bit of stress to situations to get more reps so that when he gets into more stressful situations, he will hopefully benefit from that. Even at the end of a casual round on the 18th tee box saying, okay, if I birdie this, I shoot 75. If I par it, I shoot 76. Let's see if I can make birdie. What do you think about that idea of looking for ways to add little bits of stress into your life? I guess you're going to be stressed out in bigger rounds. So the question is, do you condition yourself to handle the stress better, or do you try to play mental mind games to not be as stressed?
I'm of the mind of more of like the process oriented stuff. So I would, not for everyone, but like for myself, for example, like I'm going to have the same intentions with like target selection and what I'm going to do. If the three of us were playing around and we were on that 18th hole, I could be 5 under, I could be 7 over. I'm going to do the same exact thing. And I'm going to try and do the exact same thing if I was on the 18th hole of that US Mid-Am qualifier. Still going to pick the same, targets, still with the same intentions, because I'm trying to put myself in a place over every shot where I can just kind of hit the autopilot button. And I find if I keep changing that too much, then I kind of get out of it too often. So my belief is the stress I'm looking for is the stress of just putting my game on the line and competing is enough to make me uncomfortable and develop that experience and just keep paying attention to what's happening and putting myself through that. I'm not a fan of playing situational golf and saying, oh, I've got to birdie this hole, I've got to come back here. I think it's harder if you keep pressing those buttons, they don't really work as much. And again, yeah, there are some players who can do that. Again, my belief, my suspicion is that the majority can't, and they'd be better served trying to be consistent with their approach to every shot, every hole, and not feeling like they're changing back and forth on you. I'm not a fan of situational golf, to be honest.
Like, I think my fear is, so I'm a very routine-based player, so I'm not, I'm staying in my process no matter what I'm doing and things like that. But in my experience, so we had very different Mid-Am experiences. I entered a U.S. Mid-Am qualifier in 2014, got aggressive shanks and shot 90-something. I got
the shanks before a U.S. Open qualifier once. It's not pleasant.
There was some trauma. It took a few years to get back.
Yeah, that stings for sure.
And I'm aware that for myself, I don't know if this is true for everyone, that there is going to be a situation where nerves come in. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean I get out of my process, hopefully, but it means the mind is racing a little bit more, and you've got some butterflies. The body's a little bit tighter. And so what I said to Bryan on the last episode is that my fear for him, he's so trying to stay neutral at all points that when he gets into something, whether it's a club championship or what a member guest, whatever it may be, and there is a moment that inherently makes him nervous because he knows exactly where he stands and what he needs, that's going to be the first time that ever happens. And I'm actively trying to avoid that, though I hope I'm not taking myself out of my process to do that, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they could be too dissimilar in the sense that, you put yourself in these situations, the member get whatever feels uncomfortable to you. And for some people, that could be like a $2 Nassau with friends because of just the social pressure. And I think like that's a good thing. Like, I think when you make yourself uncomfortable and learn from it, then the next thing doesn't feel as daunting. I mean, I do like the word neutral a lot in the sense that like I tee off just understanding that golf's a super variable game. I could shoot an 82. I could shoot a 67. I don't know. And I'm open to either. And I'm not going to panic when things go poorly, or I'm not going to get too high on myself when things go really well. For example, when I got into the US Mid-Am, I played great on the first day. And I was like, oh, you can make match play. And then it just totally backfired me. The next morning I came out tighter, couple of tight shots, and it's just like I was like, this was new for me, and I'm not going to beat myself up, but I got a little too ahead of myself, and hopefully next time I'd be more patient with myself. So it's hard, and there were definitely players there, I'm sure, who stepped up and they're like, yeah, good luck to you if you play me. I know I'm getting to match play, and I know I'm going to beat you. I think those players are very rare though. And if you can get to that point, like, kudos to you. But even the PGA Tour player I coach, I don't think he's that type of player either. And he's won millions of dollars playing professional golf. We have to keep him more like not beating himself up and being realistic with what's going on and in his process. Because the second he starts thinking about missing cuts or top tens or getting into the Masters, his game starts to suffer. But he knows that about himself. And that's what we hold him accountable to. So, yeah, it's a bit of a choose your own adventure. I can't say there's like a definitive right or wrong.
One of the things you hit on a couple minutes ago, I want to come back to, that is in your book, by the way. Have a copy of the book. Love it. You did a really good job with it.
Thank you.
In that goal setting chapter, you talked about relying too much on external validation can sometimes lead to burnout. And yeah. Adam, I'm wondering if you relate to that, because you and I have talked a lot about how sometimes you get to the middle or end of a golf season and you're like, you've burned out is literally what you say. Do you think maybe that's because those external goals are so on the forefront for you?
Previous to the last couple of years, I've only played in 1 or 2 competitions a year. And so I built, and, they were usually in July, early August, and I would build so hard towards those and put so much pressure on those because they were my only opportunities of the year. And then if they go poorly, I'm then trying to get back into just like playing socially in August. And I'm sort of like, okay, I could use a break, honestly, And so I think a remedy for me is that I'm playing 20 to 25 events this year. And it's like,
holy cow, 20 to 25
club stuff. And you can include everything. Like I'm trying to,
do you have kids?
I have 2 kids under 18 months old. I'm like,
what kind of sorcery is this?
This is our list right here of all the things.
Oh my God.
You might not get to 20. It might end up being between 15 and 20, but that's the goal. Okay.
The goal is to play as many as possible. Okay. And have that goal, like have that feeling of, so in our first competition, I shot 67. I shot 5 under 67 in our first competition. In our second competition, I shot 87. So, and so I don't, like, I think if that had been a couple years ago when I had 2 things on the calendar and I had finished with an 87, I think I would have been like, do I even want to golf the rest of the year kind of thing. And I think I'm enjoying the flow of, okay, this is like a season where I am going to have events, and I'm going to have chances to rebound, and I'm going to have chances to feel the ebbs and flows of playing consistent competitive golf. That really excites me, and I hope I don't think I'm going to burn out in the sense of like there's always going to be something to look forward to. I burned out when it was like, okay, we're still going to golf 2-3 times a week, but what am I building towards? I want something to build towards is the thing that always got me at the end of golf seasons.
First of all, the fact that you can have permission from your family to play all those events, like a huge win, right? Like you've already won. That's awesome. But it is important. Like I tried to hammer this home so many times in the book, was that you need to be humble to how different it is. And because of that, you need the reps and the learning. And yeah, 1 or 2 events a year is not enough to like battle test your game in that situation. So if you are going to be playing between 15 and 25 events, that's awesome. Like I would say, like, yeah, you could have higher expectations because you're going to have more reps and ability to learn and adjust. But again, if you started off the year being like, this is not going to be a success unless I shoot these scores and do this, I think for a lot of players, that's kind of like this little noose around your neck. And then it keeps building and building and building as the season goes on. And that could be, again, putting you in situations when you're on the 8th hole and you're 4 over par and you're like, oh, here we go again. We're not going to do it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to avoid. I think that's what most good competitors can do is that, the players I've been around who, I've noticed, I'm like, wow, they've really got it together. Like, I don't think they're playing that style. They're just like, I'm doing my thing here. I've seen some great players fall apart in rounds I've played in. I remember I played in the New York State Mid-Am with this guy who just like totally fell apart, one of the best players in the state. Next day, he just kind of was like, whatever, and then just came back and shot a 66 because he's just like locked it. It didn't phase him. He knew it was possible and he got through it. And that's really hard to do. That takes a lot of obviously skill and experience. So yeah, I think the fact that you're committing to that many events is like kind of a good thing in itself, because you're going to put your game on the line that much and just say like, I'm going to learn as much as possible and we're going to see what happens. And of course, obviously the goal is to play well. Like we know that, like that's obvious. Like to most people, it's like, if you're going to play in tournaments, like you want a top 10, you want to qualify for bigger events, you want to win something, like that's the easy part. Like those goals are like obvious. It's more the other ones, those little boxes you can check off. If you get the right ones and do them, like I think you're going to get the bigger ones eventually. We all have different personalities and what we bring to it. But yeah, I've been burnt out before and stopped playing in some tournaments just because I was like, this is supposed to be fun. And I feel like I'm just doing it to like say I'm doing it and, get into this one or that bigger tournament. And I was just like, I'm not playing for money. I'm not playing to like provide for my family. Like so sometimes I'll take a step back and kind of refocus.
And getting back to Adam's thing about wanting to do something grand, I think that's like, I kind of poke fun at it a little bit, but at the same time, I think it's pretty cool that, Adam, you have the awareness to know like, hey, this really matters to me. Now, whether or not that in certain tournaments is going to add tension or make it harder, I don't know, who's to say that. But Jon, don't you think that while maybe it's not going to help him on the course, or maybe it will, I don't know, but it is good of him to at least acknowledge that, this is something that I very much tie to my identity. And like, it's something that I don't have the thing on my resume now that I want. So this is going to push me.
I have no problem with that. I think, if you're driven in something I think that's what we just kind of need in general in life, to have these like outlets where we're like deeply focused and wanting to strive for something. Like I'm all about that too. It's just there is a breaking point though, eventually for some people. And if you can keep yourself away from that, where you're like, I'm not feeling too stressed out, I'm not putting way too much pressure on myself during rounds. And like, yeah, I think it's awesome if you want to achieve something like grand in golf. I probably think on a longer time horizon. Like I think about like, I'm 40 now. And I know some golfers who used to be like great competitive players, but they're older. And it's like nothing's ever good enough for them anymore because they're kind of like stuck and they're like, I can't play the golf I used to. Therefore, like, I can't be happy anymore on the golf course. And that kind of scares me a bit because I'm pretty sure right now I'm playing the best I'm ever going to play. And I want to be at peace with the fact that, like, I love this game and I want to hopefully play it into my 80s, 90s if I live that long. And I don't want to be miserable because I went a little too overboard with like the competitive stuff. And some people might hear that and be like, oh, well, that's like a loser's mentality. Like maybe it is, I don't know, but that's my priority, is still to enjoy the game. So if this is like an important outlet in your life, that's my biggest fear with all this stuff, is that it stops being that great quest and then it becomes like an anvil that sinks you. Mm-hmm. And there's a way to get, I think, what you want out of this. I think you can have those great aspirations, but then just have like a healthier mindset that being like, I'm going to do this thing. It's going to be brave. I'm going to put my game on the line. And maybe I don't achieve those things, but I can still be at peace with the fact that like, this was awesome. I met a ton of friends along the way. I played some great golf courses and I probably got better in the process. You try and have both, right?
I think what you're saying there at the end especially makes so much sense to me, because really what I said I want to do something grand in the game of golf in a tongue-in-cheek way.
I get that.
What I mean by that is, to me now, becoming a good competitive golfer feels like the next step in what I've been doing for the last 25 years. I've never had a lesson. I was not even really that good of a high school player and all these things. I'm like, so now I'm 35. My handicap's in the low zeros. It's still not, there's still better players at my club, so I have no grandiose visions of what the future looks like. It's just that for 25 years, I've steadily gotten a little bit better. And I'm like, I think I've hit a point where I'm like, am I really going to try to grind hard just privately from a 0.2 to a +2 somehow just to say it? And I'm like, it feels like the natural progression is to say, okay, I've gotten to a certain point and I want to elevate that to something else. And it's like, maybe the delusional part of me is just that I still feel like I can constantly get better. I feel like I'm going to get better, and if I work hard, I will improve. And I know that obviously there comes a point in all our lives when I'm going to become a worse golfer one year. Bryan did that a couple years ago.
In my defense, I'm like 63, so
that's right. So I think obviously I use the term grand, a little tongue in cheek, but I think what it really means is that I want to continue to improve. And like you're saying, if you have goals that work towards that, I think at the end of that I'll be able to say, yeah, I think I will improve over the next 3 years, and I hope it's because of these goals I've set for myself.
The journey is like really fun. It is like it's super fun to look back and like think about all the moments, and hopefully there'll be a lot more of them. But I've been reading a lot about this lately, just about like, what we know about makes humans happy and all that stuff. And the one thing that I keep coming across is that, and I've felt this, is that this stuff, it does come and go. And the way we think it's going to make us feel is not actually how it feels. Like it's almost like, I don't know if fleeting is the right word, but you adjust to it. You could move into a 40,000 square foot house tomorrow and have $50 million in your bank account. And for the next 3 months, you're probably going to be like, oh my God, this is the most incredible thing ever. But you will get used to it. Like humans have a remarkable ability to adapt to good situations and bad. And that's no different in golf. So I think back to like the golfer I was, and I was like very unhappy with the game in the sense that like I was losing my temper and I just wasn't enjoying my rounds because I was obsessed with my score. Now I still want to get better, and I've gotten better at lowering my scores, but I just found that when you place your emphasis on the right things, that stuff kind of takes care of itself. So you win twice. So the journey is incredibly fun, and you realize like, if I get to these goals, like awesome, I just want people to make sure that when they don't get to them, or even when they do happen, like there's got to be something else that's driving you too. And it sounds like you already have that because you love golf. You've been playing it your whole life. So I don't see a huge problem here, to be honest with you. It's just, these are stuff, you know, I think about all the time because, yeah, I see a lot of unhappy golfers, and it's just, you know, it's a mixture of like unrealistic expectations and like not having the right purpose for playing. And like, I think about that a lot because sometimes like, yeah, I get, you know, down on myself in the game too. And I want to be happy in the game, but we can't be happy all the time. I think it's like the process you're going to go through is going to be the most fun, would be my prediction. Like it's going to be a blast for you. And then you look back and you say, that was awesome. Like, look at what happened. And hopefully you achieve some of those goals too. Like that would make it even sweeter for sure. Yeah. Like you want to do that stuff too. I'm not saying you don't want to do it.
Yeah. I want to go back to something at the beginning of your book, Jon. And you talk about defining winning. You said to remind yourself that a new layer of pressure is a testing ground where you can collect information. And I really like that. And I'm wondering, that's something that I can grab a hold onto. I like to play mind games with myself. And I could probably try to convince myself that every round of golf was sort of just like an info collecting mission and really wasn't about winning or losing. Again, getting me back to neutral where I try to take my emotions out of it. Is that something I could potentially pull off, and might that work for me?
Yeah, I think we find like different perspective shifts to like get us through the round and make sure that we're not like, again, on veering off in one direction that's too extreme. Even yesterday, I played for the first time since December. And one of the things I said to myself before the round was like, obviously I want to play well and shoot a good score, but I'm like, I want to see where I'm at. I want to see how my elbow feels. I want to see like how, like, do I have alignment issues? Like just kind of understand like I hit a few shots thin in the beginning. I was able to adjust from that. Told myself I just wanted to be happy to be out there. So I think every round of golf is some type of fact-finding mission. And if you ask yourself the right questions, like maybe you'll get better answers. But the last thing I wanted to do is go out there and being like, ooh, if you don't shoot like a 73, like I'm worried about what's going to happen this year. Yeah. Because if I did, that's easy for me to do. As clearly as I'm speaking right now, like even yesterday, like, yeah, I had some mind games to deal with. And I just kind of looked off into the distance and saw the sun and talking to my buddies. And I'm like, I'm just out here, like grateful to be out here right now. So I think when you could shift sometimes your perspective and say like, I'm here to learn about my game, especially when you're competing, like you're really going to learn about your game. That can get you away from that standing over the ball or the putt. And you're like, you got to make this. If you don't make this, like it's like we're trying to play mind games against ourselves. So our brains don't go to the place where we don't want them to. And then we can't, you know, perform our best. And I find that very, you know, the collecting information and kind of being a little analytical and asking questions, like that's one way to do it.
So to be clear, if you would have been playing with Adam on Sunday on a par 5 and he would have leaned over to you and said, if we don't make a birdie here, this is a disaster. You wouldn't have loved that.
I might have, you know, when I tee off, I play a lot of like matches against people. And like, usually it's kind of a tongue in cheek thing. I'll say like, I'm going to go play golf and you tell me what I owe you or you owe me at the end of the round. And then that's it. Like, yeah, I'll still be engaged in the game and have some fun. But like, so part of me is like, I'm just going to do my thing that I always do. And then part of me is like, oh yeah, if you have a teammate, like, all right, let's go on a run here. But in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm still going to try and hit the ball over there and not sink a putt or.
And the person who says, let's go on a run also is going to do that, just to be clear.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But you know, I'm not trying to be some like philosophical jerk either. Like I love gambling. I love talking crap with people. Like I'm there to do all that too. Like, yeah. I always want people like, if that's what you find fun, if you want to like do that stuff or you're like, let's fire at pins and like kill these guys, like go for it. I think that's awesome. Like just realize like, all right, you might not be reaching your like utmost potential if you play that way, but that's fine. If it's fun, like who cares?
All right. So I'm going to do something here. Adam, I've not told you about this yet. I've not unveiled these yet, but I've been working on my whys for competing.
Okay.
So I've read almost all of Jon's newest book, which is The Foundations of Winning Golf. You should definitely pick it up. And I think I heard you say that audiobook will maybe be coming in a couple months.
Yeah, I'm actually sooner than that. I'm 80% through it as of today.
Oh, nice.
So I think by May it'll be out for sure.
Awesome. So in going through it, I was like, I want to make a list of my whys for competing, especially as we head into some individual stuff. So here are my 5 why statements that I have, and I'm just going to watch Adam's face as I read these to see what he thinks. So number 1, to experience new things. Okay. Number 2, to have better stories to tell on the podcast.
Nice. I like that.
Number 3.
I'm fine with numbers 1 and 2. That's good.
Okay. All right. This is a good start. Number 3, to try and achieve personal best outcomes. So I've only played in 1 qualifier so far in my life a few years ago. And I was like second to last, shot a 93, I think. So I would like to do better than that at some point. That's kind of what that one's about, and continue to do that. That's an external goal one, but that's in there. Number 4, to get uncomfortable so that I can grow and be better in quote unquote normal rounds. And then number 5, to be able to celebrate some wins and also to be honorable in losses.
See, I don't understand. These are my goals. Like I could have written those goals. So I don't. So this is where I get confused sometimes when you phrase things differently. Those are my exact goals.
I don't think you guys. My impression of this mediation or therapy session, whatever this is that
marriage.
I don't think you guys are as far apart as you seem. I think there's a lot of common ground here. You're just finding different ways to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to get to the same place with certain like emotionally and for our games, we're trying to get to the same place. We talked about it previously where it's like we're trying to get to the same place of not being nervous for a bigger thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's fair.
And so I think that's where I've gone. I have said to Bryan in the first few episodes of this season, he has said, well, I don't really care about that. And I go, yes, you do.
Well, yeah, I think if you guys are kind of like on different ends of the spectrum where we're like, we probably need Bryan to maybe put a little bit more pressure on himself for results. Like that could be a good thing for him to feel that discomfort. And maybe Adam, we need to like take you down a notch from like, hey, we got to birdie this hole and then kind of balance you out in the middle. But you're still trying to get to the same place where it's like, how do I tee up in this thing and not be a psychopath? Not lose my mind, right? Like we're still trying to answer that question.
To be clear, there was the let's birdie this hole. And then a few holes later, after looking at the live scoreboard for the 132nd time of the day, he said, let's finish with 5 birdies, I believe is what exactly he said.
Let's go on a run. I said, let's go on a run. I was trying, listen, you were feeling a little discouraged. I could see it. I could feel it. And so I was saying, hey, you know what? There's still some golf left. Let's focus. Let's not check out here.
That's fair. I love that.
We could have birdied the first 5. We can birdie the last 5. Let's do it. Let's be here and be in this moment and not crap away the last 6 holes because we're discouraged about how the first 12 went. And your turn.
I had to do that. I think that's like I had to do that at the US Mid-Am. So like that second day, like I had to finish up around. And then it was raining and just had a horrible 12-hole stretch. Went from like even par to like a million over par in 5 minutes. And I had to stop myself and being like, you got 9 holes left here. You're playing Sleepy Hollow. You might never be back in this thing again. You need to find a way to right this ship and bring a respectable round in here and calm things down. And I was able to do it. And if I didn't do it, that's okay too. But there have to be those moments where you can kind of like coach yourself and like stop the bleeding. And for some people, like, yeah, it could be the birdie run or like, let's just, I loved what you said. I'm like, let's just be here now. Let's try, like, let's not give up. Like, that's one of the things that like I would always hold anyone accountable to if they're serious about this is like, you need to find a way to not just like throw in the towel and be like, oh, this is embarrassing. Like, I'm not going to try. And that's like kind of like a self preservation technique. yeah, you have to find different ways to do that, because you're your own. I know that was a team thing, but like most of the time you are your own coach out there, and you need to figure out what's going to resonate with yourself. Because in those moments, it's hard. Like when things are not going your way, it's like, how do I get out of this?
Yeah, I liked what you said there too, Adam. Let's just be here now. I wish you had said that on Sunday. No, I think what you said was, let's birdie the next 5, is what you said.
I said that, and with some follow-ups. Just because you're a poor listener doesn't mean that you have to hold it against me. My gosh.
Yeah, one of the things you had in the book, John, was that positive self-talk can be a superpower. Can you give us some examples of what that means to you?
You know, we throw around words like neutral and like stuff like that. I don't want to give the impression that like you should be this like stoic, unemotional person out there, because golf's an emotional game. And the path of least resistance is for most people to beat themselves up and get negative. This game just makes that very easy to do. So, yeah, I think we need some type of antidote to that. And you have to find like that little like pep talk to yourself. Again, with balance, like you can't tell yourself you're the greatest or you're going to come back from this all the time, because then it'll kind of fall on deaf ears. But at the same time, like you need to be skillful enough to believe it and have the experience. For example, when I first started playing competitively, I couldn't tell myself that, oh, you know, you're going to make this qualifier, you can do this, because there was no evidence. I wouldn't have believed it. So where you're at in this journey and your stage and your experience and your skill level is important. And for example, Bryan, like your message might be different to yourself with positive self-talk. In the earlier stages, it's like, let's just keep things together and like not check out here and see what happens. Whereas, you know, if you were a more experienced player, like on some of the qualifiers I've played in where I'm like 2 or 3 over after a few holes, and I'm like, you can come back from this. You can make a couple of birdies. Like this isn't the end for you. Like, you know, you've done this before and you can do it again. So let's just settle down here. And I can believe that because I have done it. I've tried it enough times. So it does depend. But yeah, I think we need to find some type of positivity, because if it gets too negative out there, then like, well, that's not so fun, right?
Yeah. Well, John, it sounds like you've got some hope for us. It sounds like you don't think we're a doomed team here in our 2-man events, and maybe we're closer than we think we are.
No, I think you'll be fine. The one piece of advice I even gave this to the Chasing Scratch guys, I know you're buddies with them, is don't apologize to each other. That's like the first thing we always do in these things, in these 2-man events. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm so, like, you don't have to apologize to each other. You're both going to do something out there that's going to feel like you disappointed the other partner, and that's golf. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. You hear that, Adam? Stop apologizing to me.
Yeah. Bryan's never apologized for anything in his life. So he's not going to start now, honestly.
Fair enough.
Yeah, John, thanks so much for joining us. The book is fantastic. Where else can people get more of your content?
Easiest place is I'm very active on Twitter at Practical Golf. I think it's at practical.golf on Instagram. The podcast I do is called The Sweet Spot with Adam Young. We're a bit nerdier on golf improvement, so we do a lot of talking there. And then you can find my books, the 4 Foundations of Golf, and now the Foundations of Winning Golf, are both on Amazon. And as I said, the audiobook will be out soon. But yeah, that's kind of where I live online, on my website, Practical Golf, and appreciate everyone listening. Last thing I would say is, like, I've said this a few times, like, I don't think there are truly right answers in competitive golf. Like, we all have our reasons for playing. And in the book, I try and give just a lot of thoughts on how you can kind of reflect and have fun on your own journey. But yeah, I think it can be like another element of the game that heightens your experience and makes normal rounds more enjoyable and actually like less anxiety inducing, and more like, when I play a normal round of golf now, it's just like, I'm like, this is nothing. Like, I can truly relax. Whereas that used to be very nerve wracking for me. And I think that's one of the big gifts competitive golf has given me, is that I really do enjoy my quote unquote recreational rounds way more. But you got to keep the right perspective, and I'm still fighting for it. Like, as I said, I'm going to go into this tournament season, like, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I don't have the perspective that I have in the book, or I'm talking to you now and I struggle. I don't know what's going to happen. So we'll see. So I'm still trying to figure it out like everyone else.
All right. Well, if you ever find yourself in the greater Philadelphia area, look us up and we'll have a game.
You got some good courses around there. I would love to do that.
Few.
Just a few.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys.
So you heard Jon's thoughts on where we're at. Adam may need to take it down a notch, and I probably need to put a little bit more pressure on myself to see some good results. But the good news is, he confirmed what we hoped was true all along, that ultimately, we're both trying to achieve the same thing. We both want to play our best golf, and we don't want nerves and tension getting in the way of that. So how's that going to work out for us? Well, we've got a few individual tournaments lined up over the next month, and 2 weeks from now, you'll hear all about Adam's Gap Mid-Am Qualifier, which is a Tier 2 event for him this year. It doesn't get much bigger than this. Next week, we're going to give you a sampler from our Patreon podcast on this feed, and then we'll be back on May 3rd with episode 6 of Season 2. Things are about to get really interesting. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for checking out the Bag Chatter podcast. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and you already know how to subscribe to podcasts, so I'm not going to waste your time. You can find us on all the socials at Bag Chatter Golf or Bryan Elaine Golf, and you can check out everything we have going on at bagchattergolf.com. If you want more content from me and Adam, check out the Bag Chatter Deli. That is our Patreon, where we only serve the choicest portions of 4-ball ham and the leanest cuts of bone meat. For $5 a month, you get to support the pod, and you get a weekly episode of our Friday supporter-only podcast, Cold Cuts, Hot Takes. You can find that at patreon.com/bagchattergolf. You guys are the best. Thanks so much for listening.